Good afternoon, Remnant. Turn to someone and give them like an eye smile through your mask and say, I'm glad you're here. I know it's hard. It's good to see so many of you here today. Yeah. Always excited to be together and worship the Lord, remembering His faithfulness, His compassion, and His mercy that can save all people. Today I get to preach on something I never preached on a Sunday. I've done panels, I've done teachings, I've done seminars. But as we're doing the True Relationship series, and then as we're going around kind of see which week the pastors will preach, I got Valentine's Day Sunday. And one of the topics that they wanted to talk about was dating. So I don't know in church how many times you heard like a message on a Sunday about that. But as I thought about it more and more, what I want to really talk about is romance. So turn to someone and say, we're going to talk about romance today. Oh, it feels awkward to even say that, huh? Y'all feel a little awkward right now? Yeah, we're going to talk about romance, and we're going to talk about romance in the seasons of dating, in the seasons of marriage, and found in the covenant of God. So, as I was kind of praying and prepping the message, like, let's have some fun with it, right? I know it's kind of strange, but when I first got the topic, I think my inner Christian or Asianness kicked in. I'm like, ooh, I don't even know how to talk about it. I feel like if I talk about it, it might step on people's toes, right? If I talk about it, some people might get offended or it might feel so rigid. And at some point, I realized for some reason, I don't know if you relate to this, but talking about dating in the church feels like taboo, right? It feels kind of like awkward or too personal to talk about, right? Like, it's weird. We're like, God works in every area of my life, and He's very personal and intimate. But when it comes to my intimate relationships, like dating and marriage, there's only a few people I talk about to. And in fact, I rarely even talk to God about it, right? It's really hard to just even pray about my spouse or to pray about dating or the relationship I'm in. And it was weird because when I used to work at corporate, I don't know if it's like this for you guys, like my supervisors, my managers, even my coworkers, many times we talk about dating a lot. Like, who'd you meet this week? Like, how are you doing on the apps, right, if you're dating? Like, they're curious. It was a fun conversation to have. They even go further as to, like, what club they're with or who they even, like, hooked up with and whatnot. And I'm like, why is it outside of church, when I reflect, everyone's talking about it, talking about romance, right? You see it all the time. But in the church, it feels like, ooh, I don't know if we can talk about this a little bit. So I want to talk about it. I want to disarm you just a little bit and say it's okay to talk about romance within the church. Because God is involved in all of our relationships, right? And especially your most intimate one, we want to see the love of God made manifest even in that, right? Because the most intimate relationships are going to have a profound impact in your life. Who you decide to go on dates with, who you decide to say okay to and send a message on the dating app, right? Who you decide to spend the rest of your life with, and as you journey along with your spouse, and every year it changes, and then you have a kid, and you see their best qualities, but their worst qualities, to have a romance that's inspired by God's love, right? So I think we should talk about it. One of the things that came up to mind, just real quick, when you think about love, I just found these cute little things that little kid said at West Baptist College. And a kid said this, Noel, age 7, love is when you tell a guy you like his shirt, then he wears it every day. It's funny because even some of us here will still do that. Someone's like, ooh, I like the smell of that perfume, or I like that hat. And you see that girl or guy you like, you'll wear that again and again. You're like, oh, he noticed me or she noticed me for wearing that, right? And that's great. That's how you woo each other. That's how you kind of peacock away. But here's another one. Billy, age 4. When someone loves you, the way they say your name is different. You just know your name is safe in their mouth. This 4-year-old is profound, man. I want to hug this. I want to cuddle this 4-year-old. I'm like, oh, you little bear, come here. My name is safe in your mouth. And that's important too, right? To be vulnerable and feel safe. That when they say your name, it's not out of judgment or criticism, but it's out of worthy love. That they value you. They value your presence. And then Claire, age 6. This is a cute one. My mommy loves me more than anybody. You don't see anyone else kissing me to sleep at night, right? And sometimes I even wonder, even for those who are married, do you guys kiss each other goodnight before you fall asleep? Is there that romance, that little spark there? Some of you are like, whoa, are we talking about that? Just a little bit, right? But who is that we find that romance with? And for the first time ever, I am going to be preaching on Song of Solomon, okay? And as you know Song of Solomon, if you've seen it, and if some of you guys have read the book before, a lot of churches went on this big thing about it when they talk about sex, marriage, and love. But for me, I just want to take the Song of Solomon as it is. I don't want to go into the whole Jewish allegory of it, or even the Christian allegory, but see the story in the canon of Scripture and understand that the Bible, right, as a whole, is a counsel to us. And therefore, when we look at the Song of Solomon, what you realize is it's a story about love, right? At the core of all of it. And the details within it, there's sections, there's wooing, there's chasing, there's sex, there's marriage. But actually, the story is about the Shumanite woman, right? And she's the protagonist of the story, right? The story is actually about the woman. And the woman, as she goes through this journey of love, as she's wooed by someone, as they go into marriage, right? And then as they consummate their marriage, and then the maturation of that love. And it's a short snippet. You don't see the full saga. You don't see the full story. And, some people like to say, or sometimes combat this, hey, why preach on the Song of Solomon, right? Solomon is not a wise guy when it comes to relationships, right? He's not the wisest person. But in this snippet, what you realize in the Song of Solomon is that it's a lyrical love poetry, right? It's a lyrical love poetry. So not everything's literal in what's being said, but it is talking about romance and love. And in that sense, the power of love, it's showing that love provides a deep sense of significance, right? And that love needs to mature over time. There needs to be growth. There needs to be intentionality. And there's this powerful aspect of love that needs to be manifest even in our most intimate of relationships. So here's what it says at the end of Song of Solomon, towards the end, in chapter 8, verse 6 to 7. Set me a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. And this is a woman speaking. For love is strong as death. Jealousy is fierce as the grave. It flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he will be utterly despised. So, the writer equates love being as powerful as death, that it has a transformative effect on the lives of who invests in love and partake in this. And likewise, in that love, right, especially those in marriage and covenant, this marriage is until death do us part. There is a strong bond, a commitment in that. And then in love, it says that no waters, no trouble, no tribulations, which will come in any relationship, will overcome this kind of steadfast love. A love that has matured, a love that has been done in covenant, a love that is found in promise and commitment. And then it says this kind of funny bit right here at the end. If a man offered love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. Basically saying, a man is stupid if he tries to buy love, right? Even if you offered all the money in the world, money does not compare to the power of love. And therefore, the man would be despised to kind of have love in this way. So today, when we talk about this delightful romance, turn to someone and say, we're going to talk about romance. Man, people are feeling weird about that word romance. We're talking about romance and love, okay? It's this. How can we have delightful romance in dating and marriage? And the baseline of it is that there's an intentional covenant love. And the three things I'll go over is that there's you got to be intentional being known, intentionally being a blessing, intentionally being in community, right? So when I talk about kind of this romance within dating and marriage, what I'm not going to do is go over all the practical kind of this is how you do it, right? This is how you all this kind of step by step. We could do a seminar or teaching another day. But what I will do is the holistic picture of how the power of love matures over time and should mature into a covenant love that provides a security and trust. And in order to do that, there's a necessity to be intentional. An intentionality of being known, intentionality of being a blessing, intentionality of being in a community. I'm just going to chop away the third one real quick. If you read the Song of Solomon, there's many excerpts where the chorus kind of chimes in. It's kind of like a Grease musical if you look at it. The woman, actually, some people think they actually sang it like a production. So the woman sings and the chorus kind of comes in, right? I feel like they might be snapping their fingers. You have your background singers. And they're like, yeah, girl, yeah, he's the one, right? He's the kind of champion or on. And then the guy sings and you go back and forth. But that chorus, just really quickly put, is the community. The community that can speak into, that can support, that can applaud and encourage. And sometimes they don't say the right thing either, but that there is a community involved as we talk about even intimate relationships. And this goes back to the beginning of the message. I know this is strange, but in church, especially in this body of Christ, we ought to be able to talk about the most personal details and the most affecting relationships that we have in our life, right? I don't want to make anyone feel less than. I don't want to make anyone feel like I'm stepping on anyone's toes. But this romantic love found in dating or in marriage, and as personal as it is, it needs to be talked about, right? You don't talk about it so seriously too, okay? Like everyone relax a little bit. Breathe, right? But this love needs to be talked about, and there needs to be kind of prayer, encouragement, support as you do it, right? Because too many people, when they get into this, not just dating but marriage, they get more and more, they feel isolated into themselves, that I need to figure it out. And sometimes when the enemy comes in with sins or other shameful factors, we become more isolated. And sometimes even when it's pride or ego, we get more isolated. And one of the things we learn in Scripture, just as a community as a whole, even as P. Joe shared last week about the church body, we're meant to bless one another. So in this, there needs to be community and people that we speak to wisely about this. And then I'm going to spend more time on intentionally being known, intentionally being a blessing as you look at the Song of Solomon and the power of love. I kid you not, I think Pastor Joe, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about dating, and one of the most profound things that I heard about dating was at one of these seminars. I'm going to share it with you. But I kid you not, I think Pastor Joe was from you when you guest spoke at an RSD retreat like 12 years ago. And when I was in like Remnant RSD. I kid you, I don't know. I have to talk to you after to see if you're the one that really said this. But everyone knows this verse, Genesis 2:2-4, right? Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And then whoever was speaking, I think it was Pastor Joe, I'm not, so I'm not going to put that on his plate. But he was like, it is Pastor Joe? It is. Okay, so you guys heard this before. I love it. It's like, it's the greatest dating advice I thought of, right? The dating is not addition, right? And then it's not the Jerry Maguire, you complete me, right? Neither is marriage, right? It's not like, hey, you're the one that's going to complete and satisfy me, make me not feel lonely. You're going to satisfy and give me all my words of affirmation. It's not that kind of thing, where half a person meets half a person equals one, right? And then, I guess it is P. Joe, he said, dating is actually like multiplication, right? And what happens is if you're half a person and there's another half a person, you don't complete each other. You'll make each other kind of for the worse, not the better, okay? Right? You become a quarter of a person, right? Because there's something missing there. There's something missing that you're trying to find one another instead of kind of healing one another, bringing the covenantal love of God into the marriage and the relationship that's most intimate. We try to seek our own. There's our own agenda, our own needs and selfishness, which is not covered in the grace and love of God, and it begins to cut and hurt and harm. So when you see it as multiplication, what happens is this: you can't be half a person when you go into any relationship, even right now in your marriage, right? It is very important for you as the husband or the wife to really go before the Lord and pray as well, to really cover yourself, to really continue to mature and grow in your love and affection for your husband, for what Jesus has done, for who God is. And in this way, also in dating, it's only when one person, right, meets one person, not the multiplication. I just love this fact for some reason. It just stayed in my head. Then you become one, right? The two become one. I'm like, wow, simple addition and math makes it so like easy to understand. And that's what we want, right? When one person's whole and the other person's whole, and when we come together, we become one. But there's a problem. We don't feel whole most of the time. I don't feel like one all the time. And if I heard this message now, and even now, like if someone's preaching, I'm like, I feel bad now. I feel like I messed up to my wife. I feel like I messed up to myself. And especially when I'm not dating, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to think about finance. I have to think about, like how to be like comfortable in my own skin, be with the person. I have all these like stigmas and all these issues. Like, I'm not whole, right? And for some reason, I don't know, but it can seem like a discouragement. But that's where we need to talk about being intentionally known, right? By God and the other in the relationship. C.S. Lewis says this: to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. I don't know why you said that, it was kind of fun. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in the casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It's funny, right? You locked it up in what C.S. Lewis called selfishness. It shouldn't change, but it changes. It changes into what it will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. There is this cost to be involved in delightful romance, right? There is this exposure to be vulnerable. But if you think about the inverse of what C.S. Lewis is saying is that to love is to be vulnerable. And if you are vulnerable, what you also open up to is to have a heart that is open. A heart that can be redeemed in the process. A heart that can not just be redeemed by itself, but also redeem another in the relationship. So in this aspect, there is this worry, right? I am not whole. I am not complete. And love and pursuing this kind of romance can harm me. And some people feel like I'm not ready to love or be loved. Or if you go a little deeper, right, some people feel like I'm not lovable. And that in itself is a lie of the enemy that prevents us and makes us feel like we're not whole. Because when you see in the Song of Solomon too, it's not just a romance story. There's problems, there's issues. And Song of Solomon 1:5-6 says this, okay? This is the woman speaking. And what she says is, I am very dark but lovely. O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyard, but my vineyard I have not kept, right? But my own vineyard I have not kept. So what happens even in the intro after she's saying, hey, come, kiss me, right, the wooing part, all that love, she kind of explains a little bit about her history, and this is a short glimpse we get. And if you look at her history, there's something where she might feel subtly insecure about her own appearance. And her own appearance being of this darker skin or whatever it may be, it seems like the way she's referring to it, right? My mother's sons were angry with me, which means her brothers had treated her poorly. She grew up in a family where something must have gone where it made her feel a certain way and was pushed out in a certain way to be a keeper of the vineyard. I guess as she worked out there, her skin grew darker. And what she says is this, there's something that she feels like is lacking in her life. Not just the romance bit, but she says, but my own vineyard I have not kept. So what you see here, once again, even in this romance, right, that ought to be delightful, she comes in a position of what may seem incomplete or lacking, right? Of what may seem like I'm not worthy to be loved in this way. And this is the obstacle that she as a protagonist is overcoming, right? All of these insecurities, all these broken experiences in the past, it doesn't have to just be relationships, but from the family, right, for her, right, is something that she is trying to overcome. And that gap is overcome by the power of this kind of romantic love that is found as the story progresses. I don't know what hurdles you may have, but the reason I'm kind of talking about this in dating and marriage is this. In order for you and I to be whole and to be part of the process in which it is, we need to also come to terms with the reality, right, of these things and these baggage that we hold, and to not be afraid of those baggages. No one here is perfect. Everyone's got a story. And sometimes, although you prayed about it and sure you've let it go and released it, sometimes in your next relationship or in your marriage, it comes up again. The scars hurt. But God has healed those scars. And this is the kind of love we want to see made manifest in our relationships. And to this, Solomon responds, right, to the woman, right? First, the woman says this actually in verse 7. After she says all this about herself and maybe something about her past that may seem amiss, tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like the one who veiled herself beside the flock of your companions? And then the man responds, if you do not know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flock and pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tent. In what may seem lacking and what seems imperfect at that moment, the man responds to the woman's call as the woman calls and asks, where are you? See, what it reveals about the woman itself is that she is willing to face and encounter these issues. She knows these issues full well, but yet she still calls out to the man and says, where are you? Tell me where you are, because I still want to know you. And in that sense, the man responds like, hey, then if you do not know, come out to the flocks, right, and come. And there is this pursuit, there is this chase. And so many times, I want to talk a little about dating, people hate the chase, right? People hate it, like, please be clear, right? Tell me everything, all these intentions and whatnot. I need to know exactly. But the truth is, most times, guy or girl, we haven't processed everything yet. We just don't know, right? We don't know the feelings there, right? All right? We don't know if we're compatible in that way, and that's fine. But in the chasing, don't be discouraged when these broken moments come up. Don't be hindered. In fact, in the chasing, that's when you get to know. You get to understand one another. And let me just put a preface and caveat on this. I feel like in the Song of Solomon, the way I read it and see it as a metaphor that it is a poetic literature, it's actually a healthy development of mature love. It goes into marriage, right? And they kind of pursue each other. Although we know the end of Solomon, and we wouldn't say it's the wisest thing, at least a snippet of story of this love affection, it matures over time. And for us, I think sometimes there's a hesitancy to go into that relationship, right? And I'm not saying all relationships are good, just go for anything that you got, right? Just stick it to the window. Don't do that. But in any relationships, in those seasons of difficulties, as those things may come up, insecurities, is there a conversation? Is there ability to really see a love that's deeper made manifest, right? Is there joy in the pursuit, joy in the wooing, right? Joy in the knowing. And one practical kind of thing that I would just insert at that moment is this. Although we can't have clarity on all things, what you do realize in the Song of Solomon is that they're both pretty clear. Okay? If you ever read it, they're pretty clear about how much they're into each other and exactly what they like about each other, okay? And in that sense, there needs to be clarity in the relationship for it to mature and grow. There needs to be a known intention of how and why, right, this relationship is being made manifest so that you can cultivate it together in your dating. And ultimately, the hope is that there's a mutual delight and a mutual pursuit of one another, right, as things come up. And the vulnerability of being intentional, right, intentionally known, that moment when we're trying to be intentionally known, vulnerability come, is overcome by actively seeking the love of God. So in that moment of brokenness, in that moment where it's kind of fatiguing, right, going on those dates or whatever it may be, or even in your romance, it feels jaded, that moment where we feel vulnerable, it's important that we actively seek the love of God, that we're willing to come out of it and pursue and ask the Lord, where is he? So that we may realize that the love of God has never ceased to be by our side. And what I mean by this is this, that the love of God is very dynamic. It's not just static, like he died on the cross for you, amen, hallelujah, y'all going to heaven. It's not like Oprah Winfrey, you're going to heaven, you're going to heaven, you're going to heaven, yeah, praise the Lord, right? But in your life and in your relationships, the dynamic love of God continues to manifest in all your relationships and in the most intimate ones. So many people, what I realize is that as you grow up and go into young adult, and then you start going to career routines, then you get married and you have kids, right? It's hard to see like the same breakthroughs. And that's fine, right? Because you're running a marathon now. It's not as quick. But what you do need to see is in your own heart and your relationships, a maturity of the love of God growing and being made manifest. And that's the joy of it. That's why it's so delightful that you see not like, hey, I want to see that person change. That person's got to change, right? You know, they're not doing what I want them to do. But you see yourself changing and growing in a capacity to love. And that's when we realize that God's love has always been by our side. That we are not loving out of a lacking, but we're loving out of a deep satisfaction. That there's security in that love. Because when love gets complicated, what happens is this. And it can. And, you know, sometimes you need to discern and clarify, so I'm not knocking anything out. But sometimes, you know, someone eventually says, I love you. And the other person in their heart's like, why? Yeah, why? I don't trust you, right? Prove to me you love me for the right reasons, right? Prove to me that you know me 100% and you love the real me. That's a hard task to accomplish, right? Sometimes a husband and wife, no matter how long you've been married, you get put on the spot. You're like, oh, I don't know how to answer this question, right? But I love you, right? I really do. And there's that development of growth, and that only comes in the security of knowing that, yes, the love of God is by my side to cultivate a deeper love within me and the other. You know, I really hope that in this, like, you know, sometimes I see, just a practical sidebar, people who, like, should be dating aren't dating as much, right? I don't know why. Maybe there's something going on in life. Maybe there's some blocks or whatnot. But I actually always encourage dating. Now, if you're in college, there's a rule, okay? The rule is no hope, scope, rope, okay? I mean, that's what I grew up with for some reason. Freshman year, you shouldn't date, right? It's just for the benefit of you and the community of the people around you, okay? And then your second year, you can scope, right? You can look around, right? And then your third year, you kind of hope, right? And then your fourth year, that's when you rope. I might have flipped scope and hope if someone knows better, but fourth year is when you rope them down in college. But after that, you know, and you're hitting this kind of new season career path, I get it. A lot of us, our work kind of dictates our schedule and our needs. But I would say you should go on dates, get to know people. You're not looking for perfection, but you're seeing God in the process. And you want to get to know these people. And at the same time, if a red flag comes up, then you know, right? You can end the relationship, but it's nothing harmful or personal about it. There's something about, once again, this practical sidebar, Christian people feel like when they date in the church, like it's game over. Someone did something wrong, right? It's damaged goods. Like that's not what it is, right? We're in the process, and that's where we kind of have to see the love of God made manifest, not out of our lacking, but a deep satisfaction. And this is what we realize in the story right now, that it's not black and white when it comes to romance. Everyone comes with their history. Everyone comes with their experiences, and that's why it's important. Tim Keller in The Meaning of Marriage. If I recommend one book to you at all about dating or marriage, this is the only book, for me at least, that I highly recommend, The Meaning of Marriage. Right? It just tells you how to live life, even in relation to others too. It's not just strictly about marriage, but it's applicable to all relationships. And it says this: when you first fall in love, you think you love the person, but you don't really. You can't know who the person is right away. That takes years. What you think of as being head over heels in love is in a large part a gust of ego gratification, but it's nothing like the profound satisfaction of being known and loved. I don't know, sometimes this kind of can rub people the wrong way. That's not what we're trying to do. But it takes time to know someone, time for them to open up, a time, and isn't that the beautiful thing in the patience of the Lord, a time that is continually restoring us, so that when you do marry, or when the relationship does go, right, and the covenantal love, and there's encouragement there, you know that God is going to be at work in that person and in your life for the next 10, 20, 40, 50 years, right? That you can have this immense hope that God is continually at work in this person. So there's the thing, right? We're looking for perfection rather than looking for God's purpose. And that's the hard part when it comes to dating. So many of us may have like what people call high standards. I don't know, right? But sometimes you just got to give a person a chance. And lately I've been hearing that more and more. In California, and as I meet up with some of you guys here, I'm not going to name names, don't worry. Don't look amazed when I say it, because then they'll know it's you. But in California, a lot of people do this too. Usually the girl's like not that interested, but she's like, okay, I'll try, because he's trying so much. And then she's like, he's a good guy, right? And it kind of comes over time. And guys, like, I don't see this as much. I've only known like 2 guys that have done this, I really think. I was trying to think about this. They don't really give the girl a chance, but you should. Take the chance, right? And see that love kind of manifest. It doesn't have to be super serious, okay? And if it doesn't work out, it's not like someone's damaged goods, okay? That's not what Christian, like, delightful romance is. But to pursue it is a great thing, because you won't know each other fully, but God knows them and God knows you. In Song of Solomon 2:4-7, it says this, right? He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Before I go into this, I just totally forgot. I was going to do one quick segue. When we kind of pursue relationships even within the church, right, or even this delightful romance and seeing the restoration of one another, it doesn't have to be so crazy, all right? And I have permission from these people to share this story, but Annie and Albert, okay? Yeah, we just talked this week. They gave me permission, okay? That's so I can look at them too. Do you guys know how Albert asked Annie out? It was right in the RCC cafe, apparently. And apparently she was with all her friends. And he said something like, was it coffee or lunch? Dinner. He's like, you want to get dinner? In front of all her friends, just casually. And then Annie had the audacity to ask for clarity, which is great. She's like, are you asking me on a date? That's great. Intentions are clear. That's awesome, intentional dating. And then, look at them now, right? You're like, oh, what is this? But that's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be so crazy, right? It doesn't have to be so, in that sense, getting to know someone in that sense, a delightful romance. Even in our intimate relationships, once again, the love of God is made manifest. So what happens here is, right, we're feeling like sometimes we're not whole. There's going to be a process. It takes time to really get to know someone. But here's what the man does. What he does is, as the woman has these needs, as she's seeing these past experiences, and as he's wooing her, and she's actually wooing him, right? They're trying to pursue each other, mutual delight in each other. The man, I would say, gives her a merciful embrace, right? That he will cover her with a banner of love. That he is willing, although knowing all this about her, it's not like, this girl's crazy, okay? It's none of that. But it's this understanding like, hey, I will cover you with this love. And you know, when sometimes they allegorize it, they say this is like Jesus' love and his affection, the way it covers us. But I would say just even in the romance part of it, when God's love is made manifest, there is this mercy that is found in one another. There's a desire to sustain one another, a desire to refresh one another, a desire to really equip and encourage the good and with one another. And this banner of love that the man has for this woman is this willful, intentional love, right? I will choose to love you with this banner that I place over you. And what's very important here in this moment is then, how do you really view the other person? And I would say this is important through the season of dating, but also in marriage. How do you view your significant other, your husband or your wife? How do you really see them, and do you see a merciful embrace as they go through trials? Because what usually happens in the first couple of years of marriage is that you really get to know each other. And then when you really get to know each other, you see some weaknesses, right? And then your communication styles are a little different. So although you both speak English, like y'all not really connecting. Like me and my wife too, right? We're not connecting, right? She wants me to change my tone and her feelings to be caught. I just want her to know the words of my mouth. I mean what I say and I love her, right? But it's not connecting, right? And we grow through that. We learn through that. And that's why it's important for one another in that relationship, in dating first to carry on, but also continuing marriage to see that merciful embrace. Because there's this fun study that someone did in a book that really saw like happiness of marriage, right? Trying to study the happiness of marriage and how do you really see like that marriage kind of flourish, right? Which one can be sustained in a positive direction? And someone named Sandra Murray at SUNY Buffalo, who's apparently like the lead scientist for romantic. She's like known as a romantic scientist, okay? I know that's strange, you've never heard it before, but I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. She did a study in which she kind of had the spouses, the people, rate each other, right? And then they also had them rate like an ideal partner, right? And then she had her friends and families rate the spouses, okay? So the spouses rate each other, but then your friends and your family also rate you, okay? And then she compared that. And do you know what she found? In order for you to be happy and to move in a positive direction in your marriage, this is what it says. The crucial measure is the discrepancy between what your partner believes about your strengths and what your friends believe, right? The difference of what you believe of your spouse versus what their friends believe about them. The bigger the discrepancy in a positive direction, the bigger the romantic illusion that your partner has of you. So if I rated my partner higher than their friends rated me, right, then their friends rated them, basically. If my opinion of my spouse is higher than what her friends think of her, then you're going to go in a positive direction, right? You're like, what? Yeah. So then it says, remarkably, the bigger the illusion, the happier and more stable the relationship. Satisfied couples see virtues in their partners that are not seen at all by their closest friends. So not only do you see the worst, but you also see their true intention and genuine heart. You see what God is doing within them, and you're proud of that. You love that. You want to champion that at the same time. That's why there's a tension, right? It's like you hurt me, sometimes you're weak, but deep down inside, I see so much good in you. I see God doing something in you, right? And they see that virtue. And as that satisfied couples see virtue in their partners are not seen, in contrast to the benevolently distorting glow, dissatisfied couples have a tainted image of each other. They see fewer virtues in their mate than their friends do. The happiest couples look on the bright side of the relationship, focusing on strengths rather than weaknesses, and believing that bad events that might threaten other couples do not affect them. Now, don't feel bad if you're married and you're like, oh, I don't see my husband or wife that way, right? But deep down, I think as a believer, as we see romantic love, delightful love may manifest, or even in dating relationship, in your heart, right, we're called to love and increase in mercy. So I know there's just like popular, psychology in some sense and positive psychology, but they come to realize this now. Like this book was written maybe 10 years ago or something, but the Bible has always written this. See one another. Seek the best in one another, right? Seek to the interests of one another. And even in Song of Solomon, you see this. Even in the brokenness, I see what's good in you, and you see what's good in me. And that's what we'll draw out from each other. And that's why it's so critical within the relationship to see one another with that mercy, to have a merciful embrace as you view each other, to foster the love and romance and really enjoy each other. And I'll just use some snippets here, right? When the woman describes the man and the man describes the woman in Song of Solomon, the woman says this about the man: my beloved is radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000s. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. His mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved. This is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Ooh, right? Her language there. And then the man describes the woman, and he does this many times too, but this snippet I chose this: my dove, my perfect one, is the only one. the only one of her mother, pure to her who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed. The queens and concubines also, then they praised her. Who is this who looks down like the dawn, beautiful as a moon, bright as the sun, awesome as an army with banners? Right? This is like that song, beautiful girls, right? They're just like, no, nothing on you, right? That's like what he's saying to her right now. Ain't got nothing on you. And there's this kind of love and affection that they see within one another. And yeah, this love isn't like fully matured yet. You don't see the whole story, but at least in the snippet of this, you see this love seeking the best within one another and actually saying it, actually declaring it. And that's how, in this sense, they foster this romance. It's a cultivation of covenantal love. And in this, actually, by this point, they do have the marriage and processionals. And they seek the love of God to be manifest in one another, right? Do you really seek the love of God to be manifest in your significant other, in your marriage, in yourself, even in your dating? Do you really see that? And do you see both of yourselves seeking the love of God to flourish and also cultivating that same holiness in one another so that you guys can increase in your capacity to love, increase in your love of Christ? And that's the beautiful thing as they come together. Funny, quick thing, people don't write like this anymore. And I tried actually on my wedding day, as I wrote my wife the letter. It was bad. It was cheesy. All right, I'm like, as the dawn rises and the sun comes out. I tried to write it, and I read it, I'm like, this is awful, right? This is cheesy. I don't know how people wrote it back in the day, So whatever way it is in your relationships, encourage one another. Vocalize it. I know some people it's like kind of hard to. You're not used to that, but it's important. As you see the good in one another, call it out. Say it. Thank them. Draw it out. Encourage them. You see something that you enjoy, spend more time talking about that than what they didn't do, or what they promised to do, okay? Or what they forgot to do. If you spend more time on that, I get it, that happens, but spend also time drawing out the good in one another. Once again, a quote from Meaning of Marriage, it says this: when the Bible speaks of love, it measures it primarily not by how much you want to receive, but by how much you are willing to give of yourself for someone. How much are you willing to lose for the sake of this person? How much of your freedom are you willing to forsake? How much of your precious time, emotion, and resources are you willing to invest in this person? It's a profound thing when it comes to when we really want to see delightful romance. It's not about what you can get. It's not about, hey, how does this person increase my quality of living, my quality of life? But what happens, especially in the Christian context and the love of God, is that, hey, I seek the greatest for you and I want to give. So rather than getting, even in the marriage or in the relationship, we seek to give, draw out the best. Rather than just to be blessed, right, we are a blessing. And I love that what P. Joe shared last week, that God has placed you in the city, in the community to bless, right? It was such a powerful thing, that there are people around you, not just for you to be blessed, but to bless others. And I said the same thing carries on in your relationships. Tim Keller later on says this: if your definition of love stresses affectionate feeling more than unselfish action, you will cripple your ability to maintain and grow strong lover relationships, right? Because sometimes the affectionate feeling may not be there. Sometimes you're just too busy and tired. Sometimes, once again, the lies of the enemy or just the weaknesses come out a little more than the good. But that's why it's important when we willfully love, right? When we choose to love and choose to love in the way that God has intended in our relationship, and then still then, although the feeling's not there, to move forward in unselfish action. And that's what Tim Keller is saying, that in that it manifests a greater, deeper love. Intentionally being a blessing is the willingness to choose grace, mercy and grace, to seek the best in one another, to trustivate and cultivate what God is doing in one another. I know a lot of us want to seek what God is doing in our life, but it's also important to see what God is doing in other people's lives, and especially in the most intimate relationships. For those who are married, when's the last time you actually prayed for your spouse and really thought, hey, what is God doing in my wife's life, my husband's life? Maybe I got a verse, maybe I got an image of encouragement I want to share with them. Some people were really good at that in dating, and then they got married. It's like, ooh, out the window. Right? There's too much things to tackle. But if you've never done it, I'd recommend trying that. Draw it out in one another. See that God is not just working in you, but in them. And you can trust them with God. You don't have to call out every single detail, but there can be mercy that abounds even in that romantic love. Ephesians 5:21 says that, right? Submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. That as you guys come together, your reverence for Christ increases, right? Your reverence of Christ brings you together and you submit, and that's why you do it. But equally, as you submit to one another, right, and come together, and this one is talking strictly about marriage and that covenantal love, that there's an increase in the reverence for Christ. And in 1 Peter 4:8, it also says this, and when he talks to the body and the community of church, above all, keep loving one another, fervently love one another, since love covers a multitude of sins. This is not to say, hey, I'm going to just enable your sin. But what it's actually saying is this: when you choose to love, it stops you from sinning, right? When you choose to love as God does and be merciful, it will stop you from responding out of the flesh, which I am guilty of so many times because I lack patience sometimes, right? And my wife is just a bubbly angel sometimes. So it's just like, it's hard. But in this, we keep loving one another and grow in that multitude, and we cultivate that in one another. Now, quick caveat, and I feel like this is the only sermon when you preach on Sunday that I can put this in. It doesn't mean all relationships work out, okay? If you're in a toxic relationship, right, dating-wise, like, don't try to make it work. Don't force it. That's why dating, like, it's not like so crazy, right? You just get to know each other, hang out, get to know more and more, and that's why you need to counsel the community. And what I'm trying to put in just for fun is this: there's an AMI meme, okay? If you've seen it before, right? It's kind of funny, but this is the only Sunday sermon I feel like I can put it in. I guess I feel fun. And here's what it says: to all the girls who are in a hurry to have a boyfriend or get married, a piece of biblical advice. Ruth patiently waited for her mate Boaz. While you're waiting on your Boaz, don't settle for any of his relatives. Broke ass, Poaz, lying ass, cheating ass, right, it goes on. I'm not going to read it all out because it insinuates something else. But that's like from Southland. That's Pastor Keith on the corner. Maybe it's a generational difference, but don't just try to force it to work, right? When you kind of stir up this covenantal love, when mercy and grace abounds, right, it's patient, right? There's a proper timing. There is this genuine kind of waiting as well. Just last couple points here. In Song of Solomon, right, and this being intentionally known and being a blessing, this is what she says later on after they get married. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned and gone. My soul failed me when he spoke. I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. The watchmen found me as they went to the city. They beat me, they bruised me, they took away my veil. Those watchmen of the walls, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am sick with love. What just happened? They just got married, and then this occurs in her life, right? And actually in Song of Solomon chapter 3, there's this another kind of altercation with the watchmen. And when I read this, and as I read some commentaries, they go different forth. But I think for her, because she's the protagonist of the story, what's actually happening is this is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the anxiety that she's going through, right? She just got married, right? She just kind of made this vow before the husband, and then suddenly everything's so good, and it should be secure, but for some reason she feels like, oh, I don't trust his love. Oh, I doubt that he's going to really be there with me for the rest of my life. And there's this vexation, and metaphorically it's represented as this watchman that beat her, this lies and anxieties that come and riddle her. And it starts to taint the love. It wants to destroy the love, which is maturing. And sometimes when we make the complex kind of jump like that, and this naturally happens for guy or girl, right? Sometimes we complicate it, sometimes we grow distrusting, sometimes there's these things that wound us. It starts to make it complex, and there's all these things, right, that may come up in our head, even as we're satisfied in that love. We might say, I'm not good enough, worthy to be loved. I'm too ugly, stupid, messed up, damaged to be loved. I'm not ready to be loved. There's something really wrong with me that makes me unlovable. Other people are lovable. Love is not for me. Bad things happen to people who love me. I'm a monster that nobody can love. People are too busy to love me. Other things are more important. They don't understand me or love that I need, or the love that I need. I fail to have loving relationships. I'm too different. People can't be trusted. I can't be trusted. We're bound to hurt each other. These are those watchman lies that try to beat your relationship, try to tax your relationship. And these lies may come, and no one is free of them at times. Some are better than most. But either way, in that sense, we bring it before the Lord and come back to his security. That's why this love is not dependent on just our willful love. And this is where it shifts to that covenantal love. Because after she has these vexations, after she has this turmoil, what you see later on in Song of Solomon 7:10 and 8:10, it says this: I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies. I am my beloved, and his desire is for me. I was a wall, my breasts were like towers. Then I was in his eyes as one who finds peace. She remembers the covenant that they made in marriage. She remembers that she can trust and be satisfied because of what they have said before each other, of how they are together. And this is why it's so important, even in our dating and relationships and marriage, to have good memories, to remember back to the covenant you made at the altar, to remember back that indeed you two are together, that we are together with purpose in God's design. And for her, as she remembers this, she says this, I am my beloved's and his desire is for me. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. And in this, what you see is also in verse 8 to 10, right? Chapter 8, 10. I was a wall and my breasts were like towers. Then I was in his eyes as one who finds peace. So finally, right, she had this brokenness. I had my own vineyard. And later, actually, at the end of chapter 8, too, she has her own vineyard. But she has found peace. She has found that safety and that trust, right? And that's a beautiful thing. When it comes to covenantal love, right, even when the anxiety and vexations come and things may occur, covenantal love shifts the standard of love to be based in God's love rather than our brand of love, rather than my capability of choosing to love you, right? When I feel like I don't have enough love, when I'm tired of Jade, I can't love anymore, or I don't love you because of this or that we shift to the standard of God's love. Equally so, our standard of love for the other is based in God's love. This grace-driven love gives us the hope to put worthy effort into our relationships, right? So what I mean by that is this. A lot of times people say, oh, I just don't have the time or the effort, right? It just takes too much effort. Well, yeah, of course. We're human. We don't have everything together. We're not going to be able to spend all that time, and that's fine. But when we do love, and especially in a delightful romance, right? We love out of God's grace, his standard of love, because he's called you to love, because he's called you to be part of that kind of intimate relationship, especially for those who are married, that he has entrusted you, right, with a spouse. He has entrusted you with these things, which means you are capable of that love, and you're capable to be loved, right? And even those who are not dating or in marriage, that you equally also are measured by God's standards and not those things of this world. You are lovable, right? You are worthy of love because God has loved you. And in this sense, a simple question would be in this moment is, do you like yourself? Do you like the way God created you? Because when it shifts into the covenantal standard of God's love, our capacity to love increases. The effort that we need to put in is not out of our own energy and capacity, right? You just got to kneel and pray sometimes. And God, in the end, fills that cup to show and respond with mercy. The worship team can come up, and I'm going to end with this last quote from The Meaning of Marriage. Once again, I recommend this book. Tim Keller says this, to be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved, well, a lot like being loved by God, it is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. I don't know where you're at in any of your relationships, or you're thinking about dating or whatnot it is. I think the core of this message, what I'm trying to say is that God has a standard of love that he wants to make manifest in you, and that you are worthy of that love. And you're worthy and able to give that love to others, right? To really bless another. So if you guys can stand with me, and before the worship team sings a song, let's just take a minute to pray. In the presence of God, you are fully known and fully loved. And likewise, he wants that made manifest, although it may take time in our earthly relationships to be fully known and fully loved. And sometimes that means we got to get rid of the pretenses. Sometimes we need to be humble enough to get rid of our self-righteousness, our own standard and brand of love, of what I'm capable of loving, of how much I am capable of loving, or how much I can trust someone's love based on why they love me. Those things got to go. And just the simple love of God fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us in our marriage and our relationships, so that we may enjoy delightful romance through the difficulties, through the circumstances, that there will be great joy. So whether you're dating or not, or whether you're married, just ask God for that kind of love. Know that you are lovable. Know that you have been designed to be part of a delightful romance also. And for those who are married, think of your spouse. They have been designed for that kind of love, and God has entrusted you with them. And they are worthy of that love, and so are you. So let mercy abound in your relationship.